Good evening. What is going on out there, IB Nation? It is IB Nation After Dark.
Yeah,
And,
you've always been wanting to say that.
I
You've
love
been
it,
wanting
man.
to say that for so long. You do love
It
saying
is
that.
just makes me feel really good inside. I don't know why. It's the little
Yes.
things, Brian. But
No, I
we
get it.
we're sitting here on a Tuesday. It's Tuesday, right? Yeah, Tuesday evening. And Notre Dame's 3-0. And you had to remind me of this when we started talking about the show, that Notre Dame is a quarter through their schedule already.
Finished quarter one this weekend. Yeah.
Like, mind blown, because it's like we wait and we wait and we wait for the season to start, and it's already 3 games in.
Yeah.
Like,
we're 25% through the regular season. Yeah.
Gosh, it's a little depressing. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little depressing knowing that they're 25% through, but at the same time, they're unscathed 25% through. And so obviously we're going to talk about that. And I just been doing this for a long time, Brian. You've been doing it a long time. I've been doing it a long time. We've been fans for
longer than
even longer. Yeah, well, that's true from a professional standpoint.
You've been on the beat longer than I have. Yeah.
And it's amazing to me, you know, you have a team who's ranked in the top 10. They're 3-0. They have mightily outscored their opponents. No game was in doubt at the end, obviously. And yet there's still people out there that just aren't happy people when it comes to Notre Dame football. And it blows my mind. It just makes me think, like, I just don't know if they're ever happy. I wanted to knock on their door on their wedding day and be like, are you sure you're happy? Like,
there's a lot of context needed in some of this conversation, Vince. And I'll be honest, perhaps it's not as many people as it seems, but even on the message board, like, you expect that on Twitter, because Twitter's just toxic. And so you expect that kind of
cesspool.
Like, hey, I feel like just saying dumb things. Where can I go to do that where everyone else is saying dumb things? Twitter.
Yeah.
Or it's even a dumber name now. It's just X.
Right.
It's just like, could you make Twitter even dumber? Yeah, let's call it X.
Yeah, hold my beer.
And
exactly.
But even some and from some people on the message board that I think are good posters, that are usually like really solid posters, and even some of their concerns are like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. And there was a guy that created a post yesterday, and it was titled "Honest Question," and he laid out like some concerns, and they were very well argued, and he wasn't being like everything sucks, and it was just like, had some fair questions. And I'm like, you have to, I think part of the problem is, number one, it's not even, it's beyond BK PTSD. I really think it comes down to, especially older fans, they've been doing this, they've been waiting so long, right? And it's kind of like, I don't want to get excited about this team because I don't want to get let down again. And I understand that to a degree. But it's like, don't go looking for trouble where none exists, right? And so he starts talking about, like, well, if this is against Texas, or if this is against so-and-so, and, then that play doesn't work. And I'm like, well, number one, they're not going to run the same exact plays. But is that really true? And so we kind of dove into that a little bit on the board. But, when you look at this team, Vince, and you say, hey, through quarter one for Notre Dame, guess what? They're not a finished product, but no one ever thought they would or should be. But I'll say this as we kind of dive into where Notre Dame is right now, and what they should be focused on right now. And maybe because of what's going on in our lives, that I'm just like, dude, I just refuse to look at the negativity, with what Sean's going through. My mom's currently in the hospital, and that's why I'm still in Virginia. And it's just like, guys, this is what's bringing me joy right now. Like, what's going, so maybe that's it too. But it just, you look at it and say, they've played 3 games, and their closest game was a 21-point win over a team that spent like half of 2022 ranked, and it's just like, what it comes down to, like with NC State, Vince, I think a lot of it has to do with, I know on our show, I spent all week last week trying to convince people that NC State was a pretty good football team, and people just weren't buying it.
Right.
And so, you look at it at the end of the year, at the end of the game, and it's like, well, I thought Notre Dame should have won by 50. They only won by 21, so I'm mad. I'm like, well, maybe you're the problem. Maybe
those are the same people saying Notre Dame was going to win by like 3.
But, well, no,
they should have won by 50.
I think there was a lot of people on our prediction show that were like 45-10 and 52-6. And it's like, who do you guys think they're playing? NC Central? Like,
Yeah, right.
No, and it's like, this is a team that last year was a preseason top 15 team and literally didn't fall out of the top 25 until they lost a game to Louisville late in the year. And then and that was after like on their third or fourth string quarterback, right? Like, guys, NC State made some plays on Saturday. That's a good football team, and Notre Dame still went out and won 21 points. So Vince, somebody just said it's like when I was trying to convince you that Marshall was good last year.
I wasn't having it.
It's a different deal because Notre Dame was still better than Marshall.
Sure.
21-point road win at NC State when you don't even bring your A game is a really impressive victory. And so when you look at Notre Dame through the first quarter, Vince, you realize, hey, there's areas this team still has to get better,
Mm-hmm.
and there are certainly areas for improvement. Aspects on offense I want to see continue to get better. Aspects on defense I want to continue to see better.
Sure.
Players that have to step up and be better. But I'll say this, there's not a whole lot of teams in college football right now I'd want to trade for. You know, like maybe some teams have some more marquee games, but when you look at how well Notre Dame has played in a lot of different areas, this team's in a good place. And so we'll just kind of Vince, as we kind of dive through this, just kind of go through offense and defense and where we think things stand. But I got to tell y'all, Notre Dame right now is outscoring their first three opponents 47-10. And a big part of that is, that is what they did to NC State. And you can say all you want about, it got out of hand in the fourth quarter. What I would say is I think Notre Dame, if anything, let NC State hang around.
Absolutely.
As opposed to, it really poured it on because, this is a team that if you look at it, Vince, they had a 10-0 lead in the second quarter, missed a field goal. Your quarterback, who had been great the first two games, takes a bad sack. Right, he did. He took a bad sack and makes what would have been a 40-something yard field goal into a 56-yard field goal. Guy misses it. You had a chance to really put them away early and didn't do it. And then NC State comes down and scores a touchdown to make it 10-7. So your double-digit lead that had existed for 13 minutes is down to 1, and Notre Dame needed 36 seconds to go down there and make it a double-digit game again. You've got a double-digit lead for half the third quarter now, and then NC State kicks a field goal to make it a one possession game. Notre Dame immediately goes right down the field and scores another touchdown to make it a 14-point game. NC State scores a touchdown to make it 24-17. You have that little brief moment of a couple possessions where you have the fumble and NC State's got a chance, and they had their window. They missed it because Notre Dame made plays.
Right.
And then Notre Dame poured it on. This game was a double-digit lead by Notre Dame game longer than it was a one-score, NC State might have a shot in this game. Right? Like, this was a game that Notre Dame, like somebody on the board said, that game gives you false optimism like the Wisconsin game from 2021. And I was like, hold on a second.
Timeout. There was no defensive scores in this game, by the way.
Well, no. It's more about the point was more about not a direct thing, but as far as the game was a lot closer than you would expect it to be. The final score was not as big of a blow. And I say, here's a big. I mean, Notre Dame got outgained by Wisconsin in that game in 2021. Now Wisconsin outgained them. Notre Dame did not play well that game. Their offensive line got dominated that game by Wisconsin. It was a close game the whole time. Notre Dame used a couple big plays to go out and take a lead. But this was a game where Notre Dame was clearly the better team. They just were sloppy. You had a 2-hour weather delay. You had rain all day. Even before the game started, they're talking about there might be a delay and and you just kind of dive into it and you're just like, there's two ways of looking at it, Vince. You can say, well, Notre Dame didn't play their best game. And if they play Georgia, they better play better than that. Well, I'll tell you something else. If Georgia plays Notre Dame, they better play better than they did against Ball State. I'm going to tell you that right now. And Ohio State better play better than they did against Indiana and Youngstown State if they want to beat Notre Dame. Like, you guys can look at it all types of different ways and spin it however you want. The fact of the matter is Notre Dame did not bring their A game and still smacked NC State in the mouth. And it wasn't a game where it was back and forth for four quarters and Notre Dame poured it on late like we saw against Wisconsin a couple years ago. This is a game that Notre Dame had an early 10-point lead. Now, I think part of the reason is, in fairness, the reason people don't think it was as convincing is because there was a 2.5 hour period where Notre Dame only had a 3-0 lead because we had a 2-hour delay.
A 2-hour time window to be really upset with the way Notre Dame was playing.
3 series.
Correct.
Right. And
Yes.
Understandably so. I
Absolutely.
think that sat in there for a long time. Like, man, they're just not looking great so far. And then you kind of ignore the fact that kind of Notre Dame came out after that and, did some pretty good things. So Notre Dame was far from perfect, but that says a lot, guys. Like in the past, if Notre Dame played far from perfect, they lost to Stanford. They lost to Marshall. Yeah. They lost to Cincinnati by 2 touchdowns in a game that wasn't even as close as the score dictated. They lost to, Miami 41-8. They lost to Stanford, on the road 38-20. That's what happened when Notre Dame didn't bring their A or B plus game in the past. They didn't bring their A or B plus game in this game and beat them by 21. I think of like the 2017 game when early on Notre Dame didn't play well, and then they had a blocked punt for a touchdown and all that. And then you go out and you're like, man, Notre Dame just dominated the rest of that game. Guess what? The margin for victory was the same as this game, and this team didn't need a defensive touchdown like they got from Julian Love that game to win by 21. Think about that.
Right.
Think about that. And so that's the thing that I'm excited about, Vince, is like, guys, this was a good win. Is Notre Dame a perfect team? No, they're not. And we're going to dive into the areas they got to continue to get better. But they're in a good place. And the other thing is, I would say, watch more college football. That's what I would encourage you to do. Watch more college football. Because if you think
sloppy,
if you think there's like all these teams that are out there just looking like $1 million and man, if Notre Dame had to play that team, they'd be really bad. And I'm like, yeah, I don't, number one, you didn't give NC State enough credit like you should have. But number two, I don't think that's the case. I mean, the defending national champions, you look at their score the first game, Vince, and you're like, hey, the second game, they beat Ball State 45-3. And I want to be like, if you're upset about Notre Dame's offensive line and ground attack because they needed an 80-yarder to get to 170 yards against NC State, and it's like almost 200 if you take out the sacks. Georgia rushed for 159 yards against Tennessee Martin, and they rushed for 99 yards against Ball State.
Didn't even break 100.
That. Right, against Ball State.
Right.
So where Notre Dame plays an 8-win team from the ACC. Right. Goes for almost 2 bills. Georgia, the defending champ, plays a MAC team, doesn't even get to 100.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And then that Georgia wants to be a team that runs the football because they're breaking in a new quarterback. That's always been their MO, is running the football, playing good defense, etc. And all they were able to rack up was 99 yards. Like it's week 2 for a lot of teams. It was week 3 for Notre Dame, and they are not a finished product. And I think that's the most important thing that everybody needs to understand is that, Notre Dame is getting better and they will continue to get better. But if you compare what they've done to other teams all over the country, they're in a pretty good spot right now. Yeah. There's a reason they moved up in the polls, as opposed to down like some teams did after winning. So I'm just saying.
Yeah. So let's dive into the areas, Vince, where Notre Dame's got to get better.
Yes.
Right? Or actually say what we know about this team right now.
Okay.
What do you feel good about right now? Well, the first thing that I feel good about, Sam Hartman's pretty good.
Yeah.
Even when he's not.
Yeah.
That's the thing we learned Saturday. Sam Hartman did not play well. I've had Sam Hartman didn't play very well. I'm like, yeah, he didn't play well. And he still went 15 of 24 with 2 throwaways, and he threw for 286 yards and 4 touchdowns. Give me that subpar performance all the time. He did turn the ball over, right? So I don't, he did turn the ball over and put it on the ground twice, right? So I'm not
absolutely, and that's not good enough. Agreed.
Right, but guys, every quarterback has games like that.
Right.
Like, I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like if Notre Dame doesn't play perfect, you're mad. Well, that's a you problem because nobody's perfect every game. I've pointed this out. Go look at 2019 LSU. That might be the best team I've ever seen. They had a back and forth game against an 8-5 Texas team that lost to Iowa State that year, right? They barely beat Auburn 23-20. It's a good Auburn team. That Auburn team had a lot more in common with NC State than it did with Navy or Tennessee State, right? And you're going to have those games. Georgia needed a fourth quarter comeback late fourth quarter comeback to beat Missouri last year. They beat Kentucky 16-6 in a game. They outgained Kentucky by like 60 to 80 yards. You know what I mean?
Right.
So my dad's laughing at me. I made beds in here for the dogs. So he's coming to get him because he just got home. I didn't know he was coming home. So I'm like, what the heck are they barking at?
Oh, that's why they were barking.
My dad was getting home. Yeah.
Makes sense.
So yeah. So, and he knew I'm doing the show too. So he's gonna get in some trouble later when I get off the show.
He wonders why he didn't have a seat in the Ohio State game.
I know, right? But well played.
Sorry.
But when you look at it, Vince, it's just one of those things where you're going to have games like that. Yeah. Teams are going to have games like that. Great quarterbacks are going to have games like that. The question is, do you do what you need to do to win? And when you look at Sam Hartman and how he played, I would argue that he was kind of bad the whole first quarter, or first half, I would argue. Started the game, I think, 1 of 4, I believe, is what he started the game. I'm going to pull up the play-by-play I have here, Vince. But he started the game, I believe, 1 of 4 against them and was just not playing well. But here's the deal. When NC State made it a 10-7 game, what did Sam Hartman do? He immediately led Notre Dame right down the field, makes that big play to find Chris Tyree open, and then throws an absolute dime to Jaden Greathouse for the touchdown.
So again, the touchdown?
Yes. Not on his game. Not
playing different
great.
Defenders, anticipated it.
Yes. Not playing great, not playing great football. But when they needed him to step up and make plays, he made plays.
Correct.
And that's the mark of a team that's going to be dangerous, is can you step up and make plays when you don't have your A game?
Right.
And we saw that from him. So that's the first takeaway. It's amazing what Notre Dame can do when they have this level of veteran quarterback experience, because the reality is in the past, when Notre Dame has had a veteran quarterback, a lot of times that veteran quarterback had regressed from what he was early in his career.
Right.
So Notre Dame never got to really experience the benefits of a guy being a veteran. It was kind of like, well, he's a veteran. He's going to now be afraid to make mistakes, and he's gonna go out there and not be the guy that we hoped he would be, and he's just not going to be this or not going to be that. And you look at Sam Hartman, and it's like, well, he's out there making mistakes and doing things wrong, but he just goes out there and keeps battling.
Right.
And to me, that was something that I thought was a really impressive part of this game. And when you start breaking down this Notre Dame football team, that's the first thing that I look at, Vince, and say, boy, they got a chance to be a really good team, because he's gonna play better than that, because he has. We've seen him do it a lot.
Well, and the thing for me is, he struggled early on. There's no doubt he was throwing high. He missed a few throws. He wasn't playing well, right? He never once in that game panicked. You never saw him panic in any way with his play, with his demeanor on the sideline, with the way he was interacting with his teammates when they were on the field. There was no panic, and it permeated through the rest of the offense. And frankly, I think it permeated through the rest of the team as well, because nobody else panicked either. And when your leaders don't panic, the troops don't panic. I mean, that's just common sense right there, right? I mean, it's and that was the case in this game, because in other times and other places, this team panics and they start trying to press and they start doing things that they shouldn't be doing when things aren't going their way to start off. That wasn't the case at all with this team. And I think that, outside of the fact that Sam Hartman was the leader of that, in my opinion, that is also something that I think we know about this team. You know what I mean? That I don't think this team's going to panic. I just don't see the panic in this team.
You want money players, right, Vince? And here's what Sam Hartman's numbers were in the first half. He went 9 of 16 for 151 yards and 1 touchdown. And if you look at that, Vince, 78 of those yards came on 2 plays on the final drive, right? Second half, he went 6 of 8 for 135 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah. He found his groove. I mean, you know what I mean? And he didn't panic on it. And he's not like, well, this isn't my day. Oh my gosh, I'm back at NC State where, I threw 6 interceptions and, it was, no, we're good. We're good.
Yep.
And he was.
Yep. Yep, it was fun to watch, Vince. It really was. And
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at something here real quick because I was curious about this, and I meant to look up this later, but I couldn't find it, or I didn't. I just kind of forgot to do it. But yeah, Sam Hartman after his fumble went 3 of 4 for 57 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the only incompletion was the seam route that hit Mitchell Evans right in the hands up the
Right
seam
in the
that he
hands,
dropped.
right in the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. That was it. And that was big too, because that showed me something between Sam Hartman and Jared Parker. He just has this big fumble,
Mm-hmm.
and they come right back out. And what do? They throw down the field. They go vertical. They didn't run. They didn't say, "Oh, you know what? Screw it. We got a lead. Let's just run Audric out of here. Let's just
get out of
run
here,
this.
lick our wounds, and get out of here." Yeah.
No, they went right vertical. I mean, they went right downfield with another vertical pass on that drive. And again, it didn't work out, but it says a lot about who this team is. And so those are things that you look at and you say, "Hey, I feel good about that." Some other things I like about this team, and we'll get into the opposite of this, but there's a lot of weapons.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of weapons. So I'll give you guys a little bit of a taste of an article that or some statistical breakdown we have. And I'm telling you guys, if you're not on the message board, you are definitely missing out on this statistical breakdown. So we have the breakdown of Sam Hartman from today's game, or from Saturday's game. And here is, so I break down left, right, middle, short, intermediate, deep, what type of dropbacks did he have, all that type of stuff. Like he was, what his dropback statistics were, bootleg statistics were, play action statistics were. Got some game film in there, some cut-ups. What was the numbers thrown to the receivers, tight ends, running backs, all those type of things. But in this game, Vince, you had 10 guys that were targeted in the game, and you had 6 that were targeted more than once. If you look at the entire season, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17 different players have been targeted this season with a pass attempt in 3 games. Jaden Thomas has been targeted the most with 12. He went 0 for 4 on targets against NC State. That's the other thing, is your best receiver so far was not good against NC State.
He was a no-show.
And you can look at that and say, well, it's not good. And, well, no. He was a no-show in the pass game.
In the pass game. That's what I was referring to.
Yes.
He blocked his butt off in this game.
Yes.
He blocked his butt off.
Yes, which is the mark of a team player. Hey, I'm not getting mine today, and I dropped my chance, and I made a mistake, but you know what? I can help the team this way. I'm going to go do it.
Yes, agreed.
And
thank you for correcting me, because that's not what I was referring to.
You can't have your best player not catching the ball. I'm like, okay, I get that. But guys, again, that happened, and you still went out and won by 21 and led by double digits most of the game. Right? Most of the second quarter, you never trailed. Notre Dame trailed for a combined 0 seconds in this game.
Yep.
Right? Like, it was tied for less than 12 minutes of the game. And then Notre Dame came out early in the second quarter. I think it was their next possession after a possession or two after the field goal. And they're, get a double-digit lead. You hold that double-digit lead the entire second quarter, because Audric's touchdown run was Notre Dame's first possession of the second quarter. I think people forget that because it took so long. It
felt like halftime. Yeah, right.
It was their first possession of the second quarter. Is what Notre Dame did. Like, it literally drive number. Yeah, no, it was actually, Vince. It was the previous drive they had scored.
Right.
And so then NC State had a drive, and then Notre Dame got the ball back, and they went to the break. So Notre Dame scored on back-to-back possessions in the first half, and and then held that lead for over 13 minutes. NC State gets it back, and it lasted for like 40 seconds, as I said before. But there's a lot of different weapons. Now, we'll get into some other things about that, but you have to, because here's why this matters, Vince. Here's why it's good to be here. Because when your leading receiver does go 0 for 4 and drops a deep ball that he should not have dropped, you're okay, because Holden Stace balled out. That wasn't a fluke by Holden Stace. This is what this breakout was going to come at some point in time, right?
Absolutely.
Mitchell Evans struggled in this game. Okay. Tobias Merriweather steps up and makes a big play. All right. Chris Tyree steps up and makes a big play. Jaden Greathouse keeps doing Jaden Greathouse things. So you could say, like, yeah, it's not good, but this is the whole thing. This is what makes Notre Dame so hard to defend right now.
Correct.
Because you can take Jaden Thomas out of the game. And you can just jam Chris Tyree all the time. And they held him and so many times and never got called. Like he was running the corner. I was about to kill a guy and they yanked him down. No call. Right. But you can do those things. And it's like, but it doesn't matter because this is the day you guys want to take him and him out of the game. Cool. Holden Stace, go do your thing. Audric, go do your thing. Right. You go do your thing. And that's a great place to be because we talked this summer, Vince, about what hurt the 2015 team is if you took Will Fuller out of the game, Notre Dame had a hard time scoring. And, we talked about how Chris Brown stepped up big in the Boston College game, but Notre Dame only scored 19 points in that game. And so this team is a little different so far through the first quarter because if you take one or two guys out, there's just somebody else ready to step up. Now my concern for that is I do worry about guys getting into a rhythm.
Okay.
Like I do worry about if you're limiting, if the rotation is so balanced, do you prevent your receivers from getting into a rhythm? That is a concern. Like, do you let a guy get hot if he's not on the field enough? Right. And that's a bit of a concern I have about like how they're using Chris Tyree. I would strongly consider them to maybe start playing Jaden Grouthouse a little bit more at the two outside spots as well, if they want to get him in there. But that is a little bit of a concern, but that's not a player problem. That's more of okay, it's been good you guys have done this, but
sure,
let's maybe take a couple of these guys and use them a little bit more. Another positive for me, Vince, about this team, the O-line is still a work in progress. Absolutely a work in progress. But the one thing that I did not question on Saturday, the first series, they were overwhelmed just by the speed of NC State.
Absolutely.
And they got their butts kicked on that first series.
Yep.
And their discipline the whole game was just they weren't always on the same page. Some of that was about NC State. But after they came out of the break, we talked about this in the show, they played hard. I did not think they played well against Tennessee State, but they played hard. They played well and played hard against Navy. So that is one good thing is you compare this to some past pre-Harry Hiestand lines. They weren't physical. They weren't tough. They didn't compete. This team is different. This team battles. And this offensive line battles. Now, I have some questions about the athleticism or lack thereof at guard, especially at left guard. But the one thing you can say that you know about this team is this offensive line is they're going to battle. Mm-hmm. They're definitely going to battle. There's no doubt.
No, they were definitely overwhelmed in the beginning of that game. And I said this on a different show, on a podcast that somebody had me on. I said, look, I'm a fan of Chicago sports. And granted, the Bears played horrible this weekend, but rain delays seem to help my teams because it was a rain delay in the Game 7 of the World Series for the Cubs, and all of a sudden they came out like a brand new team. This rain delay helped Notre Dame. There's no doubt about it. It was a different offensive line coming out of the rain delay. And I'm not saying that they were technically perfect or any of that, or assignment sound or any of that, but they were playing on a different level when they came back, as far as from an aggression standpoint and from an effort standpoint. They're playing on a different level. And so that rain delay was well-timed for Notre Dame. Now, do I think they would have gotten there eventually? Yeah, I think they probably would have. But I think the rain delay allowed them to do it earlier in the quote-unquote gameplay because they were able to kind of regroup and get themselves together. Now, I'll be the first one to admit they can't do that again against a better opponent. You're not going to have opportunities to, regroup early, right? I mean, you got to come out of the gate
when you play better offenses. Or you better hope your line's not having that issue the same day that your defense is taking a little bit of time to, maybe they're not playing a great game and then you fall behind, and that's not a place you want to be. So yeah, they got to get better. And hopefully, we don't know that this is to be true because they had a different offensive line coach last year, and we are still learning who Joe Rudolph is. But hopefully they kind of hit their stride the same time last year's line did, which was what, Vince? Game 4. Because here's what happened last year. Did not play well in the opener, did not play well in week 2. This year they at least played well in the opener. Game 3, they came out and they really sputtered the first half of the game. Just got their butts kicked by Cal early. Late in the second quarter, into the second half of the Cal game, they started to find their groove a little bit. Weren't perfect, but started to find their groove, and then they broke out in Game 4 against North Carolina.
Right.
Hopefully, that the same thing happens this year, because last year you had a lot. What was the big thing last year? You had your center was moving to left guard. You had a brand new starting center. Your previous right tackle had moved to right guard. You had a lot of moving pieces, and it was taken. And you had a new position coach, so it took him some time to get going. So I'm going to give Joe Rudolph the same benefit of the doubt that I gave Coach Heastan last year, which is, guys, he's going to be all right. Let's let him. And then you started to see it against Cal, and then boom, you come out against North Carolina, and the offensive line dominates. And the other part too is, again, these issues came against a pretty good NC State defense, but they're going to face another pretty good front seven in a week and a half against Ohio State. And they're going to face a pretty darn good defensive line in front seven, especially defensive line the week after that against Duke. And there's going to be some, USC's defense isn't great, but their front seven has some talent.
Sure.
So they're going to have to get better. They're going to have to be better than they are right now. There's no disputing that. Right. Not many teams peak in week 2 or in game 3. But they do have to get better. But I like the foundation of they are tough.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing.
Because remember, in the past, some of the offensive lines that we had issues with, it wasn't an effort standpoint, but there was a lack of toughness by some kids. You know what I mean? I'm not going to call anybody out.
I wouldn't even say it that way, Vince. And because I know exactly what you're saying. So let me cut you off a second, because I know you don't want to mean what you're about to say.
Okay,
and I can see it. So let me say it this way. They weren't coached to play physical football.
There you go.
They were coached to, here's your job. This is your responsibility. Do your job. But they weren't taught how to do their job.
Right.
And so you saw a lot of catching.
Yes.
And that wasn't a lack of toughness. When the whole line is doing that, it's a lack of physicality, because they weren't coached to be physical.
It's a lack of coached aggression.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Yes. Okay.
And I know that the offensive coordinators for those teams were frustrated by that. I can promise you that. They knew that, and because there was 2 of them. It was 19 and 21, and there's a reason that Coach Heastan got involved with those offensive linemen in 2020. Because they all knew they weren't getting that teaching. And that's why they went to him. Right. And so that's not an issue. The toughness part, the physicality part is there.
Right.
It's your footwork's not good. You're turning too many of the twists and side loops.
Right.
Those
the reaction time isn't where I would like it to be.
Correct.
And the reaction time comes from recognizing what is coming, and it needs to be a little bit faster so that you can then physically react.
And when
to
you get heavy footed, it's hard to then just, if you're not an athletic guy like Emil Wagner, there's some other guys, Billy Schrauth, Joe Alt, those guys are athletic enough to be flat footed and see it, and then still react quickly enough to make the block. Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan, Zeke Carell are not that athletic to where they can get away with that.
Yeah.
So that's something. Now, the concern is, Vince, when you're seeing that lack of footwork from all 3 of your interior guys, say, okay, is that a coaching problem? Is it them just adjusting? Is it them getting on the same page? Is Zeke's footwork, has it taken a step back because he's thinking so much about getting the guards in a good position? And so that's taken away from what he needs to be doing. Maybe, I don't know. We'll find that out here over the next couple of weeks.
Sure.
And that's going to be a big part of it. So that's kind of one of those things where they've got to improve in that area. But I like the physicality. Another thing I like, Vince, too, is this defense is still a work in progress, in my opinion. We'll get into that because I don't think they've played a good offense yet. To me, the defense has really been lights out so far, but I still have a lot of question marks because they haven't been tested. Like, say what you want about the offensive line and the issues they have to deal with, but we said all summer about the uniqueness of the challenges they would face against Navy and NC State schematically because of what they do. Those are 2 top Navy. I think last year, they were 3rd in rush defense, 2nd or 3rd in rush defense last year. NC State was 11th. They have not. Notre Dame's defense has not faced a good offense yet. Navy's offense stinks.
Right.
Tennessee State's offense stinks, and NC State's offense is just not there yet. It's not very talented, if we're going to be honest. Up front, at receiver, at running back, they're
young at receiver. I think that Concepcion, is his name, number 10.
Yeah.
I think he'll end up being good, but
he's
a true freshman, or he was a freshman.
That's
a lot to put on his shoulders. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So they're going to get tested here 2 weeks from now, and there's just not going to be. So we're just not going to know truly how good they are until September 23rd. We're just not.
Agreed.
But there are some things we can take away from it. And the first one to me is this is a really long, fast defense for the most part. Now we'll in a second here we'll talk about some of the things that we need to see more of from this unit. But I do like the speed, especially the second level speed, which to me, second level, the way Notre Dame plays is corner and linebacker. That the play of those two units has been really good so far.
Yeah.
Safety was a question mark in games 1 and 2. It was excellent in game 3. Okay. I think the D tackles have played pretty good football this year.
Yeah.
D ends have been okay as a group, flashy at times, but I don't think. Yeah, we'll get into that in a second. I won't go into that just yet. But the production has not been great. But this defense can run. Mm-hmm. That is something that you can at least hang your hat on right there. It's hard to really say a lot more about how good they are. I mean, statistically, man, they have been excellent. I mean,
right.
I'm not trying to take anything away from what they've done defensively. I mean, I don't care who you're playing. When you're a quarter into your season, 3 games into your season, and you're only giving up 10 points a game, and you're only giving up 223 yards of offense and 3.5 yards per play, you're giving up 99.7 rushing yards per game, 2.6 rushing yards per play. You're only giving up 123 passing yards. Teams are only averaging 4.8 yards per attempt and a 42.9% completion rate. When you've gone through 3 games and not a single opponent has even got up to 46% completion percentage, not a single opponent so far has completed 46% or higher of their passes, right? Like, I don't care who you're playing.
Right.
That's really good. But how does it translate to Ohio State, USC? That's Louisville.
Of course.
That's my question.
Yeah.
And there's nothing they can do about that. That's not on them. That
right.
It's not even a questioning the defense and you're doing things that I don't like and there's some things I don't like. Look, I'm never going to like Al Golden's defense. That's just personal preference. I don't love blitz all the time defenses. That's just my thing. But Brent Venables won 2 national championships at Clemson doing that. And they had elite defenses. So as long as you coach it well and your players execute it well and it's sound, you can win that way. It's just not so when I say I don't like Al Golden's defense, it's just personal preference. They could give up 10 points a game the rest of the year, and I'm still going I'd still never. That's not what I would pick. You know what I mean? It's just stylistically, it's not what I like. And so, of course, I'm going to have some concerns about what does that do when you're playing Ohio State and you're vacating the middle of the field against Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka and Cade Stover and those kind of guys, Julian Fleming, those guys. I have some concerns about that.
Sure.
And we'll find out. But look, all they can do is control what's in front of them, Vince. And what's in front of them so far, they've dominated.
You can only play who it's a cliche, but you can only play who's on your schedule, right?
Yeah.
Vince played well.
If I'd have told you before the year that Notre Dame's got Navy in the opener, so you got the triple option, that Notre Dame is gonna hold their opponents to 123.3 yards per game on the ground and 4.8 yards per play, what would you think about that after 3 games? That's solid. Yeah. That's pretty solid, especially since you played a triple option team.
Right.
That's their passing numbers. That's their pass game numbers, Vince. 123.3 yards per game, 4.8 yards per play. That's their passing numbers. Their rushing numbers, they're sub 100. So basically, it's an impressive thing. Now we just need to see it when the competition's ramped up, and it's not going to be this weekend. Little preview of the Central Michigan preview. It's not going to. You're not going to get tested this weekend. It should be another dominant performance against a inferior opponent. But they're doing the things they need to do. Let's dive into the areas where we think they most need to get better. Okay. Here, or maybe some questions that we still have.
That's fair.
Number 1 is what they're doing in the pass game. Because like somebody said in the chat, well, the concern is you can't beat Ohio State with your tight ends being that guy. I'm like, yes, you can. You can absolutely do that. If your tight ends are like the kids that Notre Dame has, yes, you can beat Ohio State with your tight end going off. Now, what you can't have is your receivers not being more of a factor. They've got to go out and make plays.
Sure.
But my counter to that would be, but the receivers did do that in this game. Tobias had a big 45-yard gain. Tyree made a big play. Greathouse made a big play. So it wasn't like last year where the receivers were like non-existent in some games. And
right.
it was all the tight ends and the running backs. That's not what happened here. It was the tight end stepped up and was huge, but the receivers also stepped up and made their fair share of plays. But when you have the tight ends that Notre Dame has, yes, you can certainly beat a team like that throwing the football. And that's something that I look at and say that they don't necessarily need, and we've said this all season, they don't necessarily need like that Will Fuller kind of guy. But I also am someone who believes that in order to win a championship, you still need to have a guy, and to beat it, which means to win a championship, you've got to do what? You've got to beat Ohio State.
Sure.
You've got to beat, those teams. And so my point would be in that instance, Vince, is like when they're playing Ohio State and it's final drive of the game and you're down by a field goal, do you have a receiver that can step up and say, hey, I can be that guy? And my answer to the whole you can't expect the tight end to do that, I just want to remind you of the stat line O.J. Howard had against Clemson in the national title game when he had 5 catches for 208 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, yeah, you can win if your tight end goes off.
Right.
And Holden Stace had 4 catches for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, if he does that against Ohio State, they're going to have a good shot to win. Right. Sorry.
Absolutely.
But against Ohio State, Jaden Thomas needs to come down with that go route.
Sure.
Right. Jaden Greathouse can't make that mistake on the 3rd down conversion to Tobias Merriweather. Right. You've got to play better. And do they have a guy that when it's 3rd and 5 and you're down a field goal and you're at midfield against Ohio State, or do you have a guy that can go out there and say, I got this? That guy hasn't emerged yet, with all due respect to Jaden Thomas and Jaden Greathouse and those guys. That guy hasn't emerged yet, and I still wonder
if
that guy going to emerge. I don't think they need a Will Fuller, but I think they need someone that at least Sam Hartman knows when the game is on the line, I know that I can go here and here. I would say you need 2.
Let me ask you this.
That's my takeaway.
Let me ask you this, Brian, and to kind of counterpoint, okay, devil's advocate, if you will. The way that things have played out so far, right? And I think there's talent at wide receiver. I think they're well coached, right? Could that money wide receiver, could it potentially be a different guy each time?
Well, sure. Again, it doesn't need to be, but it doesn't need to be the same guy. You look at Clemson in 2016 when they won the title, right? Like Mike Williams was that dude.
Okay.
Hunter Renfrow caught the game winner, and Deion Kane's the guy that caught the big pass and catch and run that got. Clemson was down 14-0 in that game, and it was Deion Kane that caught that short pass, made dudes miss, and had that big play because they were focusing on Mike Williams. Those guys need to step up and make those plays. My whole thing is in the quarterback's head. It's one thing to say, hey, Tobias is going to make this play. Or retroactively made the play, or Tyree made the play, or Jaden Thomas made the play, or Deion Colsey made the play. I don't care who makes it, but somebody's got to make it. But it's more about, does the quarterback have that supreme confidence that they're going to make that play?
Fair enough.
And I'm a believer that you call the play and you read the defense. You don't zero in on a guy.
Absolutely.
But is that guy going to step up and make that play? That's the question.
And we don't know that.
The receiver, and it could be Tyree one game, Greathouse another. I don't care.
I subscribe to that part of it. Like, I think,
but they've got to be able to do it, and that's what we still
for sure.
Know.
And Notre Dame hasn't faced an opportunity or a situation where they've needed that yet, right?
Late in the game, yes, 100%, yes, late in the game. However, I would say, you faced the best corners you faced all year, and your quote unquote top receiver got shut down and had a chance when you were struggling. Because sure. I look at that drop pass that Jaden Greathouse had, or that Jaden Thomas had, and I look at that, Vince, and I think to myself, man, that would have been a big play. That would have been a huge play. Now they ended up getting a field goal on that drive, but what would that have said to NC State, who's bringing a ton of pressure? If he makes that catch and you get 40 yards on it, right? How does that impact how they're doing? And you finally play a really good receiving core. And a lot of the receiver production they had were not, let's be honest, right? We're objective guys. How many of the big plays that the receivers made on Saturday were against the NC State corners?
Right.
The answer is none of them.
Right.
Tobias ran a slot route in cut that he caught in front of a safety for the 45-yarder. Tyree got free behind the coverage after getting ridden out of bounds and knocked down because he didn't have a good release. He got free behind the defense. Jaden Greathouse caught his touchdown pass on a safety, right? So you played one of the 2 or 3 best corner tandems you're going to face all year, and they pretty much locked your receivers down. And then when you did get free, you didn't make the catch. Now, there were other opportunities for throws that Sam Hartman couldn't get there, that they were getting open. There weren't a ton, though. One of the biggest misses of the game, biggest opportunities, Vince, was the wheel route to – did you go back and look at that on the film I sent you?
Yep.
Jeremiah Love scores, man. I mean, but it was against two. It was against a linebacker.
Right.
So they did not make plays against corners. Now, there were times where if the read would have taken Sam Hartman there, if he would have made the throw, they were open, but the ball didn't get there. And so that's still a question mark. I wouldn't say it was like – because, again, you can't fault a receiver for not getting a ball when he's open and the quarterback doesn't throw him the ball. You say, well, he didn't catch any passes. Well, he didn't get any attempts.
Right.
You know, he didn't throw it to him. You know,
right.
I would say Tobias kind of came.
Last year.
Yeah.
Like
Tobias kind of came.
Yeah.
Go ahead. So I'm sorry, Vince. Go ahead, man.
No. I was just going to say that we're not comparing, like you're saying, like there were some guys that he missed and things like that. This is in no way comparing the way things were going last year, where there were guys running open. Like it felt like all the time, and they were getting missed.
Right. So they're not doing that this year, like the way they were last year. Now, part of it is the way teams are playing Notre Dame. Sure. NC State was the same way. They were playing over top. There's times Notre Dame's calling stuff, and this is why Holden Stace had a big game this week. This is why the running backs went off last week. It's why Jaden Thomas went off last week. It's why Mitchell Evans had a big F, because teams are still they're playing over the top. They're just saying, hey, we're gonna blitz you up front, and we're gonna play over the top and not let you throw the deep ball. And so that's why Tobias got free for that big play. It's why the seam routes to Holden Stace and Mitchell Evans got open. It's why, you were able to, run a bootleg to Holden Stace, and he's able to catch the ball with no one near him on that bootleg that I had in the breakdown at Irish Breakdown. So, but the answer still is the receivers have not been able to make those plays, partly out of lack of opportunity. Sure. Because the reads just haven't taken them there. The situations haven't taken them there. And, they still got to prove that. So if we're being objective and honest, Vince, you have to be able to say, look, they performed this weekend statistically, but they didn't beat those corners at NC State. They didn't. Now, again, didn't get a lot of opportunities to do so. NC State wasn't giving them that. NC State was giving them the middle of the field, and they took advantage of it. They were giving them the seams.
They took it.
And they took advantage of it.
Yeah.
And, but I still need to see that. That's still something when I look at winning the big games, I'm still going to need to see somebody step up and make a play like Deion Colsey made against USC last year, like Braden Lindsey made against South Carolina, like Jaden Thomas made against South Carolina, like Jaden Thomas made against Navy. I'm still going to need like you're still going to need to see those, like Michael Mayer made at times last year. You're still going to need to see that, and because you're not going to go out and beat Ohio State 45-24 if you don't play better. Could they beat Ohio State like that? Anything can happen. I mean, after watching them beat Clemson by 21 last year, anything can happen. But if you're going to do that, you've got to play your A plus game if you're going to beat Ohio State like that. You've got to play your A game if you're just going to beat them, period. And so we still haven't seen the receivers play their A game this year. That's a fact.
Yep.
At least in the pass game.
Right.
At least in the pass game.
Agreed.
Another thing, Vince, too, obviously we talked about the offensive line. Needs to clean up a lot of things. I'm still concerned about the guard play from an athletic against some of the more athletic teams. And then the last thing for me, here's probably my biggest concern about the defense, Vince. When you consider the fact that they have not played anybody really good so far offensively, the fact that Notre Dame is as lowly ranked as they are in tackles for loss concerns the heck out of me. Sure. They currently rank 115th in the nation in tackles for loss per game. Now, here's the thing. They're 53rd nationally in total tackles for loss, but they're one of 12 teams that have actually played 3 games. They're 115th. Now, I've said this before. I don't care about sacks. I don't. We've seen this. If Howard Cross sacks the Tennessee State quarterback, then, it's a you don't get the interception. Right. I don't care as much about that. Sacks are just not a big thing for me. What I do care about, though, are disruptives in the run game. And the fact is Notre Dame has only had 13 tackles for loss in 3 games, and that's a problem. And then if you look at it, when you look at Notre Dame's sack numbers in that time, Vince, and you here, let me pull it up here real quick, because it's not even like they've had, they're not sacking guys like they did last year. They have 4 sacks. So, I get that one of those games is against Navy.
They still had their first sack of the year against Navy, so I mean, it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
Right?
The lack of disruptives in the run game is concerning to me. Now, the flip side of that is you're still really productive in the run game defensively, despite the fact you haven't made a lot of negatives. And they rank 28th in the nation right now in yards allowed per rush. And when you consider they're one of the few teams that, the more games you play, the more those numbers tend to go up. And you look at their run defense this year, it's been really stout so far, and they're not getting a lot of negatives. That's a positive to me. And so, that's a big concern for me. I really need to see this defensive line get more run game disruptives.
Agreed. And I felt like, they're getting hurries in the pass game, but they're not getting home enough, right?
Yeah.
They're not completing what they need to do. Yes, hurries are great. You get them off platform, you do all of those things, and it's great. But I'd really love them to get home a little bit more and really put a team in a bind and put them behind the sticks and keep the clock moving and all of those different things that you get when you get a sack, right? And so they're getting penetration, but they need to finish the job. Like that's my biggest thing from the front standpoint. It's like you need to finish. Whether it's the D line, whether it's the linebackers, because Maris was doing a good job of getting in the backfield. You got to finish. You got to finish those. Those hurries. I need those hurries to turn into sacks, and then I'll feel a lot better about the way things are going.
I know you focus a lot on sacks. I just don't.
Yeah.
Because to me, I would rather hit a quarterback in the chest, make a ball flutter up in the air and intercept it, or make him throw off his back foot and intercept it, than I would for you to sack him. Right? Now, if it's 3rd down, okay, whatever. I mean, I get it. You're still going to get the ball back. But I just feel like a lot more can happen bad for a quarterback that's trying to throw as he's getting pressured and disrupted than sacked. Because, you may get a strip sack every now and then. NC State got one against Notre Dame, knocked the ball out twice. But that was Sam Hartman not being disciplined with the football more than it was about something that happens all the time when you're playing that kind of team. And so that's the thing I look at, Vince, is when I break this down and I look at it, I just care a lot more about run game negatives and hits on the quarterback than I do necessarily pure sacks. Now, against Ohio State, would a 1st down sack have a big impact? Of course it would. I'm not anti-sack. I'm just saying, like, looking at sack numbers isn't the end all be all for me. What I look at is, but I don't think the overall pressures have been all that good. They have played bad teams, and they've played quarterbacks that aren't great, or in NC State's case, not a very good receiving core. We said that before the game, and they confirmed it. Now, some of the drops were partly because of Notre Dame. I mean, Brendan Armstrong threw behind that receiver because if he leads the receiver, DJ Brown is flying over and he might lay the guy out. And so, it's a little bit of a different situation. But to me, Vince, it's just you're just not disruptive enough when you consider the quality of the opponent, which has not been good offensively. And you put it like this, I don't think it's all about projection, right? Do you think the way that it's a rhetorical question because I know you are on the same page. Do you think the results would look similar against Ohio State that they did against NC State if the pressures aren't, like, even some of the hits that got to Brendan Armstrong, they got there late because guys weren't getting open. Marvin Harrison's they're going to be getting rid of the ball quicker when it's thrown to Marvin Harrison because they're going to have the whole, I don't care if he's covered. It's Marvin Harrison. Throw it up, give him a chance. It's a Mecca. Throw him up, give him a chance. And they're going to have more weapons. Cade Stover's off to a really good start for Ohio State. He's a good player at tight end. Julian Fleming. So the point is, Vince, you're just going to have to be more disruptive, and you're definitely going to have to be more disruptive in the run game. And I mean, you did a nice job holding NC State to 2 yards here, 3 yards there, and that's fine. But with better talent. And I don't think Ohio State's offensive line is necessarily more talented, but their running backs certainly are than what they've seen so far. And that's a big thing for me is Marcus Freeman said something. Somebody asked him a question about, him not having faith in the D line. And he said, we have a lot of faith in the D line. And my response is prove it.
Mm-hmm.
Prove it. Stop being so, let me show everyone how smart I am all the time and say, you know what? We're going to drop 7 here and turn this D line loose. Cause like even on Saturday when they didn't blitz, it's like, they weren't like just say, hey, Jordan Patel, go get him. Hey, Riley Howard, go get him. It was interesting. And one of the few things I didn't like about the game plan on Saturday, and for the most part, I very much did. But I need to see them, and this is going to be a great game for it, to test them out. Because if your D line is good enough to beat those teams, then they should feast on Central Michigan's offensive line. Feast up front.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay, so do you just blitz all day and take advantage of them having a bad offensive line, or do you allow your defensive line to finally say, hey, guys, we're going to give you a little bit of a shot this week to go get it and work on that part of what you do defensively? Because you can blitz Ohio State all day if you want, but they're good enough to where it takes one mistake on the second or third level or one bad matchup for it to be a 7-yard touchdown. That's the problem.
Right.
That's the problem. And Marvin Harrison's not going to be dropping balls the way that some other teams may have had receivers drop.
What do you mean? He's not the best wide receiver in the country?
Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So that's something defensively that I definitely need to see. And then just quickly, special teams. So just make your kicks. I mean, I get it. He's missing long ones, but make your kicks.
Yep.
And be a little better in coverage, a little bit more consistent coverage. And I would like to see a little bit more than that.
Best. Because I have a lot of faith in both of the guys that are actually kicking the ball, right? McPherson punting at a 50-yard average, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to have a problem with him. And then, Spencer Schrader, yes, he's the best 1-for-3 kicker out there.
I would say most impressive 1-for-3 kicker. I would say. Yeah.
So, he's going to right the ship. Like, I'm really not that worried. He hasn't had a bunch of just, chip shot field goals and things of that nature. Just hadn't had that opportunity. So that's going to end up righting the wrong as they move forward. I still think he's going to be a really, really good weapon for this team.
Hope so. Hope so.
I'm very confident in that regard.
But. Hope so. I mean, I mean, with his leg strength and how easily he goes through his kicking motion, I hope so. I hope he's the guy we saw 2 years ago, not the guy we saw last year. Certainly. Yeah. Certainly. So that's gonna do it for this part of the breakdown, Vince.
Yeah. So
just quickly remind people
clearly
what to do before they
make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share with your family and friends, join the message board, boards@irishbreakdown.com. It's right there. It's scrolling for you, like Vanna White, just right there. All right.
Vanna White. Like all the 20-year-olds in our chat are like, who? Who is Vanna White?
That would make me sad if people don't know who she is. But anyway, make sure like a Barker's Beauty, make sure you check out the boards at irishbreakdown.com.
Is that the guy from Happy Gilmore?
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is. He got as close to $1 without going over. Our boy Bob Barker. So anyway, just shaking your head at me. All right. So make sure you check out everything. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you that notification bell is important because, like for today, for example, normally there's a 1:00 show. We had an 8:00 show. You're not going to know that unless you hit that notification bell. So make sure that you do it and make sure you join up because it's a lot of fun over there. And Brian has been putting some amazing things on the board as far as breakdowns are concerned. So if you're into the numbers, if you're a number geek like we are, you got to check out these breakdowns on the board, man. I'm telling you, it is worth the price of admission. All right. So for Brian, I'm Vince. That was the Irish Breakdown Podcast. But don't go anywhere because we have the next part of our podcast, and we're going to dive into Central Michigan. All right. Mm-hmm. And we're going to tell you a little bit about Central Michigan, the Chips, the Chippewas, up north of the border here, and kind of what they bring to the table and what they don't.
Ypsilanti? Is that where they are from?
No, Ypsilanti is Eastern Michigan.
Okay.
I'm not sure where
Central Kalamazoo? Or is that
no,
Central?
That's Western.
Or Western, okay.
That's Western. They are in Mount Pleasant,
Mount
Michigan.
Pleasant. Okay.
Yes.
Those
Mount
weird names
Pleasant.
where all those colleges are. Okay, Mount Pleasant. All right. I was
Yes.
eventually going to get there.
Yeah, it's all good. Well, there's Eastern, there's
The
Western, there's Central.
Chippewas,
Like, yes, the Chips.
former stomping grounds of Brian Kelly and also Butch Jones as
This is
well.
true.
So
This is true.
yeah, 1-1 team lost in the opener to Michigan State, 31-7. Game that was actually close at halftime, Vince, but it was more about Michigan State not playing well than it really was about Central Michigan, to be completely honest with you. Came out second half, really put that game away. They went 4-8. They went 4-8 this last season. Their one win this year, I actually think it was a good win, Vince.
Yeah.
They came out and beat New Hampshire, who is a top 15 team at the FCS level. So I've always said I've got respect when you get a early season win over a really good FCS team. Obviously,
and it was a shootout.
Yeah, and New Hampshire obviously is where Chip Kelly got his start as a coach and came. He was the OC there before he went to be the OC for Mike Bellotti at Oregon. So it's been a good program for a long time. I think Ryan Day, I believe, also played at New Hampshire. I believe he played there. I'm not sure if he coached there. I have to go look, but I'm pretty sure he played quarterback at New Hampshire.
Okay.
Back in the day, I think. Yeah, he was. He played tight end at New Hampshire, or he coached tight ends in New Hampshire. Yeah, played quarterback in New Hampshire from 1998 to 2001, and actually got his coaching start there in New Hampshire back in 2002. So, like I said, good football program, and they got a good win, a very high scoring game, 45-42.
They won on a field goal. A last second field goal. And the funny part is last year they were 6 of 14 kicking field goals.
Yeah.
They were terrible.
Yeah.
And this was this kid's first ever collegiate field goal was to win the game. Like,
that's huge. That's big time.
You give that kid a lot of credit.
That's
you know
awesome.
what I mean? It was a 47-yarder, I believe, to win the game. So it wasn't a chip shot either. So
that is awesome. That is awesome. Their head coach is Jim McElwain. For some of you remember, he was the former head coach at Florida. Yep. Spent 3 seasons at Florida, went 10-4, 9-4 his first 2 years, and then got fired in year 3 because Florida likes to fire guys early in their careers after they have decent seasons.
Right.
First time they have a bad season, you're out of here. Spent 3 years at Colorado State before that, and then before he got his head coaching start, he was the offensive coordinator at Alabama from 2008 to 2011. So he played a role in that really good start for Alabama. He, of course, was the offensive coordinator in 2009 when they beat Florida in the SEC. So let me rephrase. When they spanked Florida in the SEC title game and then went and won the national championship. And he also was the offensive coordinator in 2011 when they beat LSU for the national championship. And then, of course, that sprungboard him into his head coaching career. He is in year 5 at Central Michigan. He's had 2 bowl teams in his previous 4 seasons. And in 2021, Vince, they actually won the Sun Bowl against Washington State. So he's got a Power 5 win under his belt as well. So that's what we have. Yep. Last year was a tough year. What's funny is they actually got off to a pretty good start, Vince, and really battled Oklahoma State, really competitive against Oklahoma State. Then
2-score loss.
Yeah, it was 58-44, but it was a really they played with Oklahoma State for a while. If I remember correctly, I'm gonna have to look up the box score because that was like 5,000 games ago of that I've watched and scored. But I believe it was like Oklahoma State had a big lead and Central Michigan just battled back.
Okay.
They were down 37-7 at one point in time and just battled back. I mean, it wasn't a game where you're like, gee, they're going to win this football game. But they showed a lot of heart in that game. You're thinking, hey, this team might have a pretty good offense. And then you realize, nope. So even though they scored 44 in the opener, they only averaged 24.8 for the season. And they only had 3 games after that where they had over 30 points. One was against Bucknell, and then against Buffalo, and then against Northern Illinois. So not a great offensive football team, nor are they really all that good on defense. And we'll kind of break those down. But it's been a tough go of it the last couple of years for Coach McElwain. Obviously losing record last year, went 4-8. Don't really think this year's team is going to be a whole lot better, to be completely honest with you. His last year was actually his first losing record, Vince, because he went 3-3 in the COVID year. Because if you remember, the MAC teams only played like a handful of games that season.
Yeah, they're projected to be a middle of the road, MAC team, literally in the middle, like 6th or 7th out of 12. Yep. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And 103rd overall. I mean, it's not going to be a great team. Yeah. And somebody had mentioned, and I don't want to throw shade at Central Michigan. That's not the goal here. But somebody said, do you go into this game thinking, okay, starters for the first quarter and then this, that, and the other? No, you don't. You still go in. It's just like Marcus Freeman said in his pregame against Tennessee State. You show these guys respect by giving it your all.
Because it's not about them. That's the thing that we will always say. It's not about them.
Correct.
This is always about you.
Correct. Now,
that's the key. It's about
if Notre Dame plays the game the way they should play it,
right?
I think it would be similar to a second half. Now we get we start subbing.
What do we always say, Vince? The result is a byproduct of the process, of the mindset, the mentality, the standard. You play to the standard, and then the results will take care of themselves. That's basically how it works. And so you don't go into a game, because you remember when Notre Dame did this in 2018. So you come out in the opener and you beat Michigan, and you're like, "Hey, great, you beat Michigan. This is phenomenal. That was a big win." You were talking about it all season, all off season, the big Michigan game, and how important that game would be, and you came out there and you got the job done, and then you go out the next week and you're playing a Ball State team that, simply put, Vince, was just not very good.
No,
and they just were not very good. They were coming off of a 2-10 season, and Notre Dame beat them 24-16. And in that week of practice, they got they were getting the third teamers reps during the week of practice in ways that they didn't in the past. Yeah. And the starters didn't get as much reps. It was kind of like, hey, and the players went into the game with the mindset of, this team sucks. We're just going to roll the ball out and they're going to lay down and die. And they had that mindset because the coaches had that mindset with how they went through the preparation. And then you ended up playing a 4-quarter game, and you never got your backups in the game.
No, they didn't.
So you go into this game with the mindset of, guys, this is a normal week. We're not getting off our routine. We're going to push you. It's the standard. It's the standard. It's the standard. And I don't care who the opponent is. When you miss that practice and tackle, I'm going to get on you like we've got Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State or USC or whoever on Saturday, because that's the standard. It's not about CMU. It's not about the guys on the names on the back of their jerseys, the logo on their helmets. It's about you.
Correct.
And then the byproduct of that is, if you play your game, then you can pull guys out in the third quarter. That's going to be interesting, Vince, because I still am you've got Ohio State next week, and you want to make sure you're getting work.
Sure.
So
I get that.
That's part of it too.
Yeah.
But
and it depends on how the first half goes. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, right. How efficient are you being offensively? Right. Are you being dominant defensively? Like there's a lot of bits and pieces to exactly what you said. Now, if they come out sloppy and they're still scoring points, you keep them in a little bit longer, because that's not how you want your last game time reps to be before you get Ohio State. You don't want that. So it really just depends on how the game flow is going, in my opinion. If things go the way they should, though, maybe the starters are in the first series of the third quarter, whatever the case may be, right?
And we can dive more into that as we get into the week when we'll kind of get back on track against Central Michigan and explain why we're thinking that they may have the starters out at halftime, because, again, you don't want to necessarily be disrespectful, because I'll say this. When I watch a Central Michigan team play against Michigan State, they just don't have a lot of great players. They battle their butts off, though. They're a pretty fundamentally sound team. They are. I think this staff does a nice job. They've got some veteran coordinators. Paul Petrino is their offensive coordinator. That's Bobby's younger brother, who was his offensive coordinator, I believe, at Louisville. Rob Akey is their defensive coordinator. He was in the NFL for a long time. He was a head coach at I think Idaho for a number of years. So he's a veteran guy. They're not, Ryan and I were texting about this before the show, but they're a pretty vanilla team, a lot like Tennessee State was. But as we saw, Tennessee State still brought stuff from all over. So they're going to show some stuff defensively that we haven't seen on film. Offensively, they're a traditional spread team, Vince, with a running quarterback, right? So we're going to see power read zone. bootlegs where the quarterback's going to have pass pass run options.
Yep.
They don't have a ton of skill at running back. They don't have a ton of skill at receiver. The receivers are decent for a MAC team, but they're not like the kids Kent State had last year, where one of their kids transfers to Penn State and the other kid transfers to North Carolina, right? Like they don't have that.
They have guys coming in. Like there was I believe a Wisconsin transfer that's coming in that didn't get any playing time really at Wisconsin, but he'll probably be the upper echelon guy, for Central Michigan.
Maybe
it's that sort of thing. Yeah.
Right. So, not a lot of skill talent. And the guy you're talking about, Stephen Bracey, he's caught 2 passes for 6 yards through the first 2 games.
There you go.
Right. So sometimes, there's reasons guys are at those levels. Right.
Yeah.
But so when you look at it, Vince, you're going to see it really comes down to this. It's about the quarterback. He's not much of a thrower. He is a true run throw quarterback. And that great timing of that comment.
I wanted to pull that up. Yep, I wanted to pull that up.
Bert Emanuel. Yeah, he's more elusive than he is like a burner.
Right.
But he's got really good running instincts. He kind of shot puts the ball, Vince. I don't know if you had a chance to watch some of the film. He kind of shot puts the ball a little bit. He'll hit the occasional downfield shot, but he'll miss some throws. They will attack the middle of the field. They're going to pull their linemen. They're going to run some of that stuff. They're going to do misdirection. There's stuff on film where we're having the whole line go this way, and then the back will go another way, and the quarterback will go another way. So it's going to require you to be disciplined, and this kid's going to get in space, and you've got to shut him down.
Yeah,
he had over 100. Yeah, he had 100 yards rushing this past weekend against New Hampshire.
He had a really long run for a touchdown early on in the game.
Yeah. So that's that. You're going to have to be prepared for him, and if you shut him down, they don't have a lot else. Their offensive line is a little on the small side. They're 300, 285, 325, 295, and 300 across the board. Their tackles have some length, some height to them. 6'5" at left tackle, 6'7" at right tackle. Their interior guys are 6'1", 6'1", and 6'3". Their center is a short, stubby kid who transfers from Southeast Louisiana. He started 13 games there. Really tough kid, fundamentally sound, just not very athletic and not very good. Their guards are small, not overly athletic. Their left tackle's just a solid player. Their right tackle's got a little something to him. He's 6'7", 300 pounds. He's got probably the most potential of all the linemen. But this is one of those games where there's no reason not to let your D line go out and attack. This is the perfect game for that, and let them get some of that work in. To rush the quarterback, especially on third down. Yeah. But they're not overly athletic. The run stunts their name does is going to give them a lot of problems. You just have to be disciplined, because what can happen, Vince, is you can blow up their run, contained mistake on the backside. Bert Emanuel runs for 40.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what it can go down to. Or you're not locked in on the outside and you let him get a ball over your head, 50-yard gain. They have some of that in them. And Michigan State did a pretty decent job of keeping that in check and not letting them make those plays. Obviously, Central New Hampshire did not. I mean, the first touchdown was just a quarterback draw right up the middle for 66 yards. He drops back, lets the defense bail, and then boom, just creases it right up the middle. Didn't even have any offensive linemen really lead blocking. It was a running back was the lead blocker for him. That was it. They had they had a 31-yard touchdown pass, a 21, another 32-yard touchdown pass in the game. So it really comes down to, you can't allow them to get those chunk plays that get them back on track when they're struggling. He's not a very accurate quarterback. Went 7 of 19 last week for 193 yards. It speaks to what I'm talking about, Vince.
It's big. He big played them, and that
yes.
Because I watched some of that game, and it
4 completions of over 30 yards in that game. By the way,
some guys were sneaking behind the coverage, and he kept his eyes up, and he found them. It was those kinds of plays that they were making to continue to score. I mean, it was like you said, both teams were in the 40s. You know what I mean? And so
they had a kick return, I think, in the game too, didn't they?
Yeah,
or was it
they did. Yeah. I believe it was. There was a return. I thought. Yeah.
Can't remember if it was a kick or a punt. Let me go look at it. It was a kickoff return. Yeah, 86-yard kickoff return. It's not getting a whole lot of distance on the
I was
kickoff.
going to say
cousin.
it's dropping on the 14, but anyway.
Yeah, it was a big play game. If you watch the whole game, it was like
lots of
66-yard
big
touchdown
plays.
by Central, 80-yard touchdown by New Hampshire, 86-yard kick return by Central, 31-yard touchdown by Central, 21-yard touchdown by New Hampshire, 32-yard touchdown by Central, 71-yard touchdown pass by New Hampshire that tied the game up. And then, of course, as you mentioned, they went down on the next drive and won the game. So
I'll tell you what, the one
plays.
I know we're not playing New Hampshire, and that's fine, but the number 20 for New Hampshire, he was your prototypical 1AA kid who, probably wasn't getting a lot of big D1 offers, goes here and is just a dude. Like, he was just a dude. He was playing all over the place. He was clearly the guy on offense that they wanted to target all the time. They were just getting him in motion.
He's their running back.
Things. Yeah, he's their
running back, and he had 295 receiving yards in the game. Yes, 12 catches for 295 yards. Yeah,
they just figured out how to get him the football, and he's an undersized kid, and he just plays hard, man. Like I enjoyed watching him play in that game, to be honest with you. But anyway,
I'm watching them set up a screen to him right now, play action screen to him. He's just bouncing off tackles and just, it's a good football player.
Just plays the game hard, man.
Yep. So defensively, here's the interesting thing, Vince. I actually like their talent on defense better than I do their offense, but they're still not real good on defense, which kind of surprises me. They've got an interior guy that is a really you watch him play and you know exactly why he's playing in the MAC, because he's like 6'1", 285. And then you watch him play and you're like, but now I know why he makes plays in the MAC. His name's Jacques Bristol. He's a kid from Florida. And you're like, because he's just got a really nice get off, real quick, great motor, good hands. Their other defensive tackle, Ryan and I were talking about this. He's a try-hard kid. He's just not very good.
Yeah.
And then they had a kid that transferred in. I believe he transferred in last year. I think this is let me just check on that. I think he transferred in last year. Yeah, he transferred in last year. Didn't play. I believe he was injured last year, but he transferred in from Memphis. He had 3.5 sacks at Memphis, and I'm thinking, he's 6'5", 275-pound defensive end. I'm thinking, okay, this guy's going to be a dude, right?
Yeah, he's got some juice.
Just kind of a guy. And he's just a guy. And nice, looks the part, right? Like, get him off the bus, and he looks the part. Just a guy. Their other edge players aren't that great. They've got a linebacker that I really like, number 22. I don't know if you had a chance to watch him, Vince. He's a really good football player. Kyle Moretti, really good football player, very active guy, pretty decent athlete. Blitz him a lot in the pass game. Had 14 tackles against Michigan State. Really all over the field in that game. Really, really quality football player. And then they have a corner who was a first-team All-MAC kid last year, Dante Kent. He was a good football player. Now, the problem with Dante Kent is he's like 5'11", 192, I think, and really good football player. If he was about a 1/10 or 2/10 of a second faster, he's a Power 5 player. Like, he moves like a Power 5 guy, like footwork-wise. He's instinctive. He'll come up. There's a play against Michigan State where they ran I think it was like a little quick screen pass. I forget how they got out there, but it was just a quick outside behind the line play. And I'm like, okay, let's see what he does. He just comes up and just drills the ball carrier. Just boom, just hits him, right? And boy, this kid's a tough kid. He just doesn't have the speed. That's really the problem. But he's a good football player. And if you're not on top of your game, he can play with you. Safeties are try-hard hitters. They'll smack you. They just don't run great. They've got about 4 guys on defense, though, that I really like talent-wise, that are good football players. We're on offense is like their quarterback and just a bunch of bodies, right? Yeah. Defensive, they actually have some guys, but they weren't really good on defense last year. And, of course, they're giving up, 38 points a game, 36 points a game this year in 2 games. So that's the side of the ball that if you're not locked in, they've got a couple of those short, quick guys on the D-line and a linebacker that can blitz that could create some disruptives. And then there's their rover, number 3. What's his name? Trey Jones.
Trey Jones.
He's their rover. I expect him to come a lot in this game. I expect them to trigger him.
Why not?
They're a 4-2-5 team.
Yep.
I think they're going to bring him a lot. I would, especially out of 12 personnel, and basically say, we're going to stop your run. We're going to make your receivers beat us. That's what Central Michigan's going to do. And with all due respect, Notre Dame better be able to take advantage of that, Vince. They better, because this is not a team that's very good defending the pass.
Right.
They gave up 279 yards to Michigan State. They gave up 493 yards to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
They gave up 406 yards last year against Oklahoma State. So, yeah, this isn't a team that's really great at defending the pass. And so it should be a game. Although, here's the interesting thing. I actually really, really want – this is going to sound crazy. I really want Sam Hartman to throw an interception in this game.
What?
Because he's going to throw one eventually.
You just want to get it out of his system?
Get it out of the system against Central Michigan where it doesn't hurt you. You know what I mean?
Can you imagine the vitriol we're going to hear? Oh,
Yeah.
he sucks. He threw an interception against Central Michigan. Get him out of here.
I hope he does.
Where's Steve Angeli? Get him in the game.
Post right there. But no, we'll definitely see that. We'll, but the point being, though, in all seriousness, is this is a game where the receivers should be able to step up and make plays. And if they're not able to step up and make some big plays, you start wondering, like, okay, what's the reason why?
Is it ever
and
going
if teams
to
are going to keep playing deep against you, there are a lot of cover 1, cover 3. If they're going to play deep against you, okay, then do you have some stuff built into your system to take advantage? Maybe hit some deep comebacks, hit some deep outs, and start hitting some of those plays and try to get them to bite harder. And then, what do you counter with? So I do want to see some of that stuff. I know people say, oh, you just come out and just run the ball and they can't stop you running. And that's who you look, you guys are we're going to have to, we talked about it. We're going to have to see Notre Dame's pass offense come out and do some things. And so I would like to see them come out and build that. But I also think their corners are decent enough to where you're getting a decent test from them, right? They're better than Navy's corners, in my opinion. So you'll get that, but this is also a game, as I said, you're going to get tested in your offensive line from a quickness standpoint. Now, physicality-wise, this is a game Notre Dame should be able to push Central Michigan around. I mean, they're not a real big team. As I mentioned, the one kid, Maurice White, has some size to him. He's 6'5", 275, but the D tackle I really like, Jacques Bristol, 6'1", 295. I don't know if he's really 295. You know what I mean? They got another kid named Robbie Stewart who's listed at 6'3", 300. He's one of those guys that when he stops playing football, he doesn't have 300 pounds.
About 220.
Yeah, that or he's just going to, go the opposite direction.
Go the other direction.
Yeah, he just they just don't have a lot of that beef, Vince, so you should physically be able to push them around in this game. But they're try-hard kids. But the thing is, they're all kind of short. On the inside.
I've heard a lot of 6'1s.
Yeah. A lot of 6'1s and 6'2s from this group. And so you're going to have to play with good pad level and come out there and do what you're supposed to do. But we're going to find out if they can, Vince. We're going to find out if they can. But that's again, 4-2-5 defense is what they play. Right. They trigger their safeties a lot. They're going to get one of their safeties down in the box a lot in this game. Their corners will mix up often and press. They'll come up and then bail pre or post snap. They don't play a lot of – Ryan and I were talking about this. They don't play a lot of line games, but they do a lot of pre-snap shifting.
Okay.
Right? They're one of those teams.
Gotcha.
And they also line up at some funky fronts. They're a 4-2-5 team, but I'm watching them against New Hampshire, or was it Michigan State? And they just came in one series and were basically playing like a 52. Like, it was weird, man. Like they were like playing like either four eyes and a nose, and then the rover was on the edge and the defensive end was on the edge. And I'm like, dude, they're playing a 50 defense right now.
Right.
Like, not even like a 3-4, but like they're playing a 50 defense right now. And you're like, okay, right, whatever. I mean,
back to my middle school days.
Right. It's like, is Barry Alvarez come out of retirement or something like that? And he's coaching the defense there. But they'll do a lot of that pre-snap stunting, where they'll move and shift and all that kind of stuff. But they don't do a ton of games afterwards. But I do expect that to be different against Notre Dame. That's just not who they've shown on film to be. But neither did Tennessee State, and they brought guys from all over the place because they're going to know we can't stop Notre Dame's run game playing base defense. They know that.
Right.
They gave up over 150 yards a game last year. Right. They know that they can't come out and play Notre Dame that way. They gave up 300 yards to Buffalo, 245 to Northern Illinois, 287 to Bucknell, right? 199 to Akron. They know they can't kind of line up and play their base defense against Notre Dame. So then what does Notre Dame do about it? That's going to be my question.
Sure.
offensively. But that's what they are. I would call them a well-coached team, Vince, from a toughness and fundamental standpoint. They're just kind of a dull team from a play design and play calling standpoint. That's really the thing. It reminds me a lot like Ty Willingham's staff. I've said this a million times. Like, I think that staff was really good at teaching the basics of football. Line up, block, here's how you line up, here's how you tackle, here's how you run routes. Yep. They're just like no creativity whatsoever to their game plans, and they didn't have the athletes to get away with not being creative. Right.
Yeah. Right.
And that's kind of how I feel about Central Michigan. So
sure.
I don't think their coaching is really a problem from that standpoint. I think the problem is they just haven't recruited very well. They just don't have players. And I think that's more of the
and that's to be expected.
That's more the issue for me
in a game like this. I mean, so.
Yeah.
But it's an opportunity.
not even compared to Notre Dame. I mean, compared to where they were before.
Oh, gotcha.
Like, that's what I mean. Is like, they had that one guy that was only there for a couple years, and but he left them with what was the guy's name? It was he was an NFL guy for a long time. What's his name? John Bonamega, and he went 3 straight bowl games, and then has one bad year, went 1-11, and they fired him and brought in McElwain. But that guy had left him with some good talent, and that talent is kind of depleted.
It's gone now. Yeah,
it's depleted. Yeah, in my opinion. So that's
gotcha.
That's Central Michigan, Vince.
Yeah, there it is. So, and we'll talk a little more Central Michigan as the week goes on, but we're not going to dive too deeply into Central Michigan. I mean, it's still Central
We'll
Michigan.
talk some matchups on Thursday,
Sure.
keys to victory, and I'll have some things to say about them tomorrow, but it's going to be more from a looking at Notre Dame standpoint is really what it's going to be about. It really is. And now, Vince, we did start a couple questions. We're going to do like a little mini mailbag here, and we're going to get out of here after that, but not like a full mailbag. We just had a couple questions that we started that I just want to kind of quickly.
There's some good ones in here.
Yeah, just want to kind of quickly get to and discuss here a little bit. I thought this was funny.
Beefeater ND08. Brian, who would your starting lineup be if you had to make a team out of IB regulars? Oh my. Part 2.
Yeah,
would you be able to trust Archer and Ladarius not to sabotage things?
Yeah. So I wanted to bring this up because it was funny. I don't know any of you enough to know who's big or small or whatever. I don't know, but I will say this. I love Archer and Ladarius, but I'm not trusting them. I'm not that. I think they're plants, so I wouldn't trust them. Sorry, guys, can't do it. Can't do it. Can't do it. Yeah. So, but we did have a couple that I wanted to get here real quick.
That's funny.
This is the one I wanted to bring up because this was something that I wanted to address a little bit more detail here in the chat.
Yeah, Mark Brown says, "Look how far the O-line came last year. Should we expect similar growth?"
We should expect it. Yes, we should expect it, meaning that should be the demand. That should be the expectation. Correct. I don't mean expect it as like, yes, I'm certainly expecting that to happen based on track record. I don't know that about Joe Rudolph. And so I want to make sure that the proper usage of expectation is being understood here of what I'm saying. The expectation is that you should do this. I don't know that they're going to do that because this is year 1 under Joe Rudolph. And I don't really care what he did at past places. It's about what are you doing here?
Sure.
And we don't have a track record of what he's done at Notre Dame. So we're going to find out if he can get him there, Mark. But if he's the O-line coach that we hope he is, you should really see this group take a step against Central Michigan. If they're just kind of bully Central Michigan and they're still not playing with great footwork and they're still not being super assignment correct, that's a problem for me because you're now a third of the way through the season. You've got the tough stretch coming up, right?
Yep.
So we need to see some growth from that standpoint. And they're playing tough and all that, but to me, that's like kind of like rewarding someone for doing what they're supposed to do. Hey, Dad, I cleaned up my room. Okay, what do you want, a cookie? Like that's what you're supposed to do, right? Like that's your job,
like my kids,
right? And so. You're an offensive line coach in Notre Dame. Of course, your unit should play tough. Now the question is, can you get them to play more cohesively? They did that in the opener. They haven't done that the last 2 games. Yeah,
as an elite unit. Right. That's the most important.
They've had some flashes, like the block against on the 80-yard touchdown run was phenomenal. I mean, literally, Audric Estime didn't get touched. This wasn't like the Tennessee State 50-yard game Like, remember the 50-yard against Tennessee State, Vince, where he comes through and he hits like 3 guys hit him and he bounces off of.
And they start bouncing off of
Yeah.
him. Yeah.
He didn't get touched.
Right.
He didn't get touched. Like, it was great blocking on that particular play.
Yes.
And he ran old school power O out of that overload formation. It was beautiful. But and there was the first run by Jadarian Price was really impressive. Just blocked it up great. They needed the safety to keep him from scoring a touchdown. There were 5 or 6 plays like that were blocked really well, but then mixed in was also a lot of not very good. And that's the part that's going to have to get improved upon as we move forward. So I wanted to get a little bit more into detail on that question from Mark, because we did kind of get into it. But yeah, if he's the coach we hope he is, like, you don't want to go into Ohio State and you haven't fixed that by game 5. That would concern me.
You're almost halfway through the season at that point. Like,
exactly.
Yeah,
that would concern me.
Yeah, agreed.
Quite a bit.
I agree with you. I need to see a step in this game. We call these kind of games get right games. They need to get right, and there's no doubt about it. I need to see a dominating, or at least a step forward to a dominating offensive line to make me feel the way I want to feel this time next week.
Yeah. Where you're confident that, hey,
correct,
this is going to happen.
There's a lot of things I'm confident about with this team. I need more.
Right. Because again, it's I know, like, I'm more confident now than I've been at any point in time thinking about this team that they're definitely going to go minimum 10-2. Like, I'm because they're just going to go out talent 10 teams on their schedule this year. It's going to happen.
Yep.
The question still exists, however, okay, but can they go out and do it to where they can be the real impact guys? And we don't know the answer to that. And so we're going to find out here real soon. Here's a 2-parter from Ben Tarnowski that I wanted to address as well.
All right. Thanks, Ben. With the meat of our schedule coming up and not having a bye until after USC, would you consider pulling defensive starters after the first quarter / half, or at least rotate often to keep them fresh and let the young bucks get more snaps?
No. What I would do, Ben, in your circumstance, if I was dead set on doing that, what I would do is I would mix the young guys in with the first team throughout the first 3 quarters is what I would do. I am not a fan of pulling guys at fourth quarter. Guys, listen, Notre Dame's starters did not play a ton of snaps against Navy. They did not play a ton of snaps against Tennessee State. They do not have the wear and tear of a typical 3-game team on them. They just don't. So we don't need to kind of worry about, saving reps in week 4 against Central Michigan.
Right.
Like, the most snaps any player on the entire defensive roster played against Tennessee State was 38. The top 3 of the top 4 snap getters in that game were defensive backs who are built for more snaps.
Right.
And only 7 players played over 30 snaps in that game. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So they just don't have the volume on them like you'd think, like, you remember when you had guys playing 60, 70 snaps on defense. Vince only had 2 guys play over 40 snaps against Navy, J.D. Bertrand and Maris Leofau. They only had 2 defensive linemen play 30 or more snaps against Navy. So they've done a pretty good job already of playing a deep rotation in the first 2 weeks. Now, we saw them get a lot more snaps against NC State. Xavier Watts played 73. Maris played 70. DJ Brown played 61. Howard Cross played 58. This is according to Pro Football Focus. Riley Mills played 49. Batelho played 54. I mean, so you started to see the reps, but that's the whole point, is you limit them in some of those games to make sure they can handle that volume and not wear down. But the way they've done it then is the way they do it now, is which you're mixing those guys in early. One of the problems I had against NC State, Vince, is I was concerned about this is, okay, we saw them play a guy like Josh Burnham a lot in the first 2 games, but then this past week we didn't see him until the 4th quarter when the game was over. That's the mistake that I have. But that boils down to, this is an Al Golden thing. And look, I praised Al Golden to high heaven for the game plan, and it was a great game plan in a lot of ways, but my problem continues to be he's still way too reliant on how smart he is And in turn, how much his players can know. Because,
Yeah.
when you look as good as Josh Burnham looked, why would you not want him on the field when you're facing Brandon Arnold? We might make a mistake. Well, okay, but some guys are going to get beat because they're just not athletic enough to make a play. And sometimes he may make a mistake, but he's also going to do? Go make a play.
Yeah.
I wish Al Golden would take some of the mindset that like Dylan McCullough has with like Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Bryce, which is, hey, look, I know that they're young players and they're going to make mistakes, but you know what they're also going to do? They're a rep away from ripping one off for 80 every time they touch the ball. Right? Josh Burnham used to be one of those guys. And so that was a disappointing thing for me, is that we did not see him. I don't know that he played a snap, maybe one snap until the last drive.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And
I don't remember seeing him out there.
That concerned me a little bit.
Right.
I mean, Jason Onye only plays 18 snaps on Saturday, but Howard Cross played 58. Like, okay, I understand Howard's playing great, but that can't be the case from Ohio State on to Stanford, right? So
Agreed.
I would like to see them do more of that, and getting those guys in early could be a way of doing that, in my opinion.
Beefeater NDOA. Brian, are you giving the OSU QB too much credit? I've not seen him yet, but he's still a kid.
No, he's not a kid. He's a junior in college. He's a third-year player, number one. He has way more experience as a quarterback than C.J. Stroud had when he took over as a starting quarterback in 2021. If you remember, Vince, in 2021, C.J. Stroud took over as a starting quarterback with a grand total of, drum roll please, 0 career pass attempts at Ohio State, right? So, number one. Number two, I'm not giving him too much credit because you never heard me once say Kyle McCord's going to go out there and rip you up. What I'm talking about is he's throwing to Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka and Cade Stover and Julian Fleming, and they're so loaded at receiver that Cardinal Tate and Brandon Ennis aren't even getting a ton of playing time, right? Like, think about that, guys. And Cardinal Tate might be starting or getting like borderline starting minutes at Notre Dame if he was there right now, right? Like, he's that good of a player. And Brandon Ennis would be playing a ton right now if he's at Notre Dame. And they're not playing a ton. They're playing, but they're not playing a ton for Ohio State right now. And so I don't care who the quarterback is. The point is, if you're not playing disciplined football on defense, it doesn't take the number 2 overall draft pick to hit a slant route to Marvin Harrison.
Exactly.
Or just throw it up and let him go get it. It does not take a, Peyton Manning to do that. It takes a guy that's good enough to be on scholarship at Ohio State, right? So it's not about Kyle McCord or Devin Brown. It's about, I don't care who their quarterback is. I'm worried about 18. Right? I'm worried about Emeka. I'm worried about Cade Stover. I'm worried about those guys making plays. I'm worried about Travion Henderson getting a screen pass and you've blitzed yourself into a problem. And Travion Henderson catches a screen behind one of your blitzes because Ryan Day has figured out your tell, and he knows when you're going to blitz from that side, and so he throws a little slip screen behind it, and you got 3 Ohio State blockers and 2 Notre Dame defenders, and freaking Travion Henderson has the football. That's right. What I'm worried about. It doesn't take a 5-star quarterback to throw a slip screen to Travion Henderson. You know what I mean? So to your point, so Beefeater, like if they had a CJ Stroud, I'd be even more nervous about that based on the lack of pressure we've seen the first few games, at least the last couple games. But it's the pass catchers that I'm concerned about, not so much the quarterback. And we've seen that at Notre Dame, man. We've seen okay quarterbacks put up big numbers. I mean, Ian Book didn't all of a sudden become a better player in 2019 than he was in 2020. Why was his production so much better in 2019? Well, number one, he regressed a little bit because he was being coached by Brian Kelly. But number two, in 2019, he had Chase Claypool and Cole Kmet. In 2020, he was throwing to Javon McKinley and Ben Skoranek. Now, they're good football players, but they're not Cole Kmet and Chase Claypool. So that's what I'm more concerned about, to be completely honest with you.
Corey Dean. Who has the best offense Notre Dame will face this year? USC?
I think it's USC.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's USC because, to me, Vince, that's where to Beefeater's question, that's the biggest difference. Now, Ohio State has a better receiving core. I think their running back rooms are similar, but Ohio State's is better. Ohio State has a better tight end, at least especially more experienced tight end. I think USC has a better offensive line. It's not phenomenal, but I think Lincoln Riley's a better offensive mind than Ryan Day.
Okay.
I believe that. Not that's not a knock on Ryan Day. It's just I think Lincoln Riley's a great offensive mind, especially when he has a quarterback like
Sure.
Caleb Williams.
Oh yeah.
And Caleb Williams is still the best, in my opinion, the best player in college football. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And they've shown a greater willingness to be balanced than Ohio State has under Ryan Day. So, I mean, you're watching what USC's done the first couple games. I mean, with all due respect to Ohio State, they haven't exactly lit the world on fire offensively the first 2 games of the season. You know, they went for 380 and 5.7 against Indiana. They went for 482 and 35 points against Youngstown State. And then you go look at what USC is doing, and you know they're averaging what? I think they're averaging over 50 a game. Yeah, 59.3 per game. They played 3 games. They're averaging almost 60 points a game. Their lowest output of the season was 501 against San Jose State, who's a pretty good football team. They went for 668 against Nevada, and they went for 573 against Stanford. And Vince, I don't know if you watched that game. They could have scored 100 on Stanford.
Oh,
Lincoln Riley did to Stanford what Steve Sarkisian did to Notre Dame back in 2014.
Yeah.
Remember when he called off the Dogs that game? It was like they were killing Notre Dame. They could have scored 70 against Notre Dame that day if they wanted to.
Right.
And Coach Sark, showed class because he knew Notre Dame was a beat up football team and showed some class and called off the Dogs. It was 49-3 at halftime. And they only scored 56 the whole game.
Yeah.
So he could have really embarrassed Stanford if he wanted to, but that is a really good offense so far. Now they haven't played anybody worth it. Well, San Jose State's actually a decent team, and that game was a lot closer than the final score showed. They poured some fourth quarter points on against San Jose State. It was like a 2-score game in the late third quarter, I believe, if I remember correctly. It was a 1-touchdown game at halftime against San Jose State, but then they do what explosive offenses do. They just kind of poured it on in the second half, like Notre Dame did.
Oh, like Notre Dame did?
Oh,
okay.
Right. So I'd say NC State. Ohio State's number 2 because when you have the receiving core they have, and when I say receiving core, I'm also including Cade Stover into that conversation. I really like him at tight end. I would actually kind of consider him a little bit more of like an H-back than a true tight end just because of his body type and the way that they use him, honestly, Vince. But, that's the best group of pass catchers that Notre Dame is going to face all year. That's definitely the best group of pass catchers. Sure. Are they the best offense as of today? And I can go off of what we've seen so far.
Right.
No, they're not the best offense. Now, could they be when they play? Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, they could be. Let's see what they do against Western Kentucky and their defense this weekend, which isn't very good. So we'll have a lot better feel for who they are at that point in time. So that's my takeaway. Vince, would you agree, disagree? What are your thoughts on that?
USC was my instinct, right? Because just the way they have the ability to put up points. I think USC has to work a little harder to put up points than USC does, at least in the first few games, from what I've seen. And I don't know. I just feel like if all things are equal, you go to the quarterback, the trigger man is going to make the difference, and it's going to make it a better offense. And I also agree with you that Lincoln Riley is a better offensive mind than Ryan Day. And so that elevates them to another level as well. So it's not just about the guys on the field. It's also about the guy calling the plays and designing the plays and all of that. And I think Lincoln Riley gets the check mark there.
Yeah, agree. So that's going to be some interesting stuff. So here's one from Matt Ginther. He says, Brian, is that long sleeve shirt available on the IB store? It is. It's a pullover.
Yeah, man.
So it's an Adidas pullover. This is a gray one. I've worn the navy blue one before, and then Vince has worn the white one.
Oh, the white one. I love it.
Yes, this is available in the store, Vince. So yeah. So that's going to do it, Vince. I just wanted to get a few questions in there that were kind of somewhat related to the topics that we were discussing during the show. So yeah, I just wanted to get that all over to you. So tomorrow, guys, remember 1:00. We will be back at 1:00. I'm going to do my show tomorrow at 1:00, the midweek rundown. Have a lot more to talk about, and then of course Thursday. I will still be here on Thursday. I'm going to actually fly back Thursday night. Hope Mom should be home from the hospital by then. But if she's listening, hi, Mom. How are you? Love you. But she said she's going to listen tonight. But I'll be probably going home Thursday as of now and getting back in time for the game. But and we'll have a mailbag on Friday. So we've definitely got some stuff going on, some stuff planned. And then next week it's Ohio State week. But right now it's about getting this team better. You got one more guaranteed opportunity to get better, right?
Yep.
And that's what we're looking at here. So Notre Dame kicks off. Yeah, they kick off second quarter of the season on Saturday, man.
That still blows my mind.
Ramps up a little bit from here on out, buddy. It really does. So this is your last get right game of the year, in my opinion, Vince.
They won the first quarter. Now they got to win the second quarter.
Impressively so.
Yes, they did.
Impressively so.
If you would have told me, if you would have given me the stats and the kind of how things went down in the first 3 games, and you said, "Okay, do you want this?" I'd be like, "Yep." Moving on to week 4. So very happy with where Notre Dame is right now. Of course, there's things to clean up. That's why the coaches are still coaching. If they were a perfect football team right now, they'd be like, "All right, guys, we'll see you Saturday morning. Make sure you're at the stadium by 10 o'clock, and we'll get after it."
Right.
That's not the case. They're going back into the lab. They're going back to the practice field, and they're fixing the mistakes, because there's always going to be a mistake. Brian, have you, in all the good teams that you've ever coached, has there ever been a perfect game, like start to finish, every play, every rep, perfect game as a team? No. And
I've been in games where we've hung a 70 on people.
Yeah.
And you stuff to correct in games. Yeah.
There's always stuff to correct. Always. And so we're always going to be in a position where we can find things that need to be corrected for Notre Dame, and we will continue to do that. But we're also going to point out the good, folks, and there's a lot of good to be pointed out. So keep that in mind. Go to bed happy if you're a Notre Dame fan. You're in a good place. Okay,
you got to get better. But you're where you are right now in the season.
Correct.
A really good place to be.
Absolutely. Really so, all right, everybody, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your family and friends. Jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com.
And check the merch store too.
You took the words right out of my mouth, man, because the merch store has some good stuff, and I can personally guarantee the pullover, the Adidas pullover that is in there is awesome. I absolutely love it. It's my favorite article of clothing that I have from IB. So
because nobody, and I mean this, nobody wears more IB stuff than Vince.
Well,
nobody wears more IB stuff than Vince. Other than when you're mandated to not wear IB stuff at school, you're wearing IB stuff.
I did wear IB stuff, I think, out to my anniversary one time. And you even gave me crap for that one. But yay, I even have my IB sweats on. I'm not going to stand up and show people, but I've got my IB sweats on, which are amazing. So I'm telling you guys, there's good stuff in there. So go check it out. But all right. Well, thanks for hanging with us on a little bit of IB After Dark. Hit that notification bell just so you know when there might be an impromptu show. All right, everybody. So for Brian, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast.
And thanks everybody for praying for my mom. Appreciate y'all very, very much.